Hi, welcome to the Sioux City Public Museum. My name is Teresa Weaver-Basey and I'm the Curator of Education here at the museum. And I am going to give you a virtual tour of the Sioux City Museum today. We're actually going to do this by sharing my screen, and I'm going to be showing you a series of 360-degree views of the lobby and the permanent gallery of the museum. So I'm right here on the Sioux City Public Museum homepage. I'm just going to scroll down to the virtual museum. Click on this, and this is our virtual tour. So if you want to spend more time with this beyond our tour today, you can certainly come back and click on this option. And what we're going to see here is our museum lobby. And this was taken with one camera that took a whole series of shots that gets merged with a special software. So we're starting out in the lobby, which is really dominated by a large scale image of an architectural rendering of the first Sioux City Corn Palace. And on our tour today, I'm going to take you on 7 wonders of Sioux City. And the first wonder of Sioux City is the Corn Palace. There were 5 corn palaces built in Sioux City from 1887 to 1891. And this image that you're seeing of the first corn palace was built at 5th and Jackson Street in 1887. It was 100 feet tall, covered 25,000 square feet, and used over 15,000 bushels of corn. It took 15 days to haul the corn to the site, 6 days to erect the building, and over 300 people came together to decorate it. This was the first of 4 more corn palaces built in downtown Sioux City, and each was showcased in the fall as part of a Corn Palace Festival. Hundreds of thousands of visitors came to gawk at the corn palaces and enjoy the festival activities as well. These structures were covered with corn and grain on the interior and the exterior. And each year after the festival, they were torn down, and preparations were made for a bigger and better corn palace next year. In the center of the scene here, this is the corn palace, a recreated corn palace ticket booth, which now hosts a photo booth. You can see the main doors there where you would come in. Anywhere where you see this eye, that's an opportunity when you're doing this tour on your own to click for more information. We've got our donation cow there. And if I spin this around a little quicker, we're going to see these later as well. These terracotta pieces are architectural pieces from a building that was in the Sioux City Stockyards area. Our information desk is there. This is not usually in the lobby of the museum. This is a replica suffrage wagon used by suffragettes in the United States, but this one is actually touring Iowa this year and next year as part of the 19th Amendment commemoration that we're having. And then I'll just pan up here so you can see that architectural rendering of that first Sioux City Corn Palace. This is our lobby. This is the entrance to the orientation film, which is a great interactive film about Sioux City history, but it also goes into more details about those corn palaces. And since that's our first wonder of Sioux City, I'll just show you some of the images of those Sioux City corn palaces. So this is the 1887 Corn Palace, the first, 1888, and each year was a different theme with different murals kind of surrounding the exterior there. 1889 Corn Palace, all located in downtown Sioux City. The 1890 Corn Palace, and the final Corn Palace in 1891. Now, these corn palaces eventually became too costly to build and maintain, and there were other issues like the Floyd River flood of 1892, and then a global panic, financial panic in 1893. So Sioux City built the last corn palace here in 1891. Mitchell, South Dakota built their corn palace in 1892, and they've had one there ever since. The 1891 was so big that you could actually drive through it. There was an arch across the road there. I'll go back to our virtual tour, and I'm going to click on the next scene. And that takes us to our Siouxland attic. This is kind of an eclectic mix of artifacts and some interactive pieces here. This little piece here, when you lift the trunk, a film plays in the mirror, and it's called The Ghost in the Mirror. It's really fun. When you come back, we hope you'll pick that up and enjoy that. An iron lung here. We've got some other pieces. This is the clock that came off of the Battery building, which is now Hard Rock Casino. And you can see in the corner here that one of the Thorpe clocks as well. So a lot of fun pieces here. I'm just going to click a little to get a little more detail on this iron lung so you can see what that is. So the polio epidemic in Sioux City was quite severe, and this was happening in the 1950s. And the many patients who had severe polio spent their days in the hospital, and sometimes spent several hours a day inside an iron lung. So their head would be out here, but their whole body would be inside the machine there, and that would help them breathe. And we get a lot of stories from family members who talk about how really upsetting it was for parents to not see their children because they couldn't visit their children on the polio ward, and they would sometimes spend days sitting outside the hospital windows. That was as close as they could be to their children at that time. Sioux City was actually one of the first communities to test the polio vaccine in 1954. So next slide, we're actually going to go right through these doors into the main gallery. And here, as we enter the main gallery of the permanent gallery of the Sioux City Museum, that brings us to our second wonder, which is this orange road paver. We can't see a super view of it here, but we're going to see it really in most of the images that we look at here in the permanent gallery because it's so big. You can really see it from almost everywhere in the museum. And there's a close connection to the red dump truck that would have worked alongside with the road paver when they were both being used. So both the road paver and the dump truck are 1950s to 60s era vehicles which were used here in the Midwest and in Sioux City. Northwest Iowa was home to some of the largest road construction companies, including the Irving F. Jensen Company, who owned these vehicles, and they were also restored by Irving Jensen III, and Irving Jensen Jr. and Irving Jensen III. So the road paver was made by the Carrying Company in Milwaukee, and it was used here in Sioux City to pave Sioux Gateway Airport, as well as many streets, highways, and the interstate. The dump truck would actually dump the dry mix into the, I'll back up here, into this hopper here, which would then lift straight up, and that material would come down into the cylindrical mixer, and then the raw cement would come out the back. We'll see more of that as we tour through the museum. The concrete is then leveled by hand or with a separate machine. When the museum was built, these two vehicles were actually driven inside through a special garage door next to the permanent gallery, and then all of the exhibits were completed all around them. And to really exemplify what a wonder it is to have this beautiful orange vehicle here, let me show you a picture of it before it was restored. So it looks pretty glorious now, but it was once in pretty sad shape. So when you come to see the museum in person, I know you're going to enjoy seeing our road paver and dump truck. From this portion of the gallery, if we look to our left, this wall here is essentially a fossil timeline. And so it's punctuated with some early fossils that are found in this area, which are all sea creatures, because this was once covered with water, this area, including the plesiosaur spine that you can see there. Later creatures walked on land, and that was we've got a mammoth femur here and some mastodon bones as well. I'm going to go to our next, here in the foreground, this is called the Time Machine, and it's an interactive piece where you can use maps, photos, and descriptions to kind of explore Sioux City through space and time. There's a wonderful timeline here. So this next gallery is called the First Peoples Gallery, and it really details just that, the earliest people living in the Siouxland region. From this area, we're kind of standing under a log enclosure that would look similar to what houses would have looked like about 1,000 years ago. They would have been completely finished off, but this is at least the structure. And then the bone, stone, and pottery tools here are all about 1,000 years old. Many of these are from a village that was located just outside of Sioux City, and some of them are from later villages in the area. I'm going to focus for our third wonder. I just want to focus on one particular piece. This is a historic piece, not an archaeological piece. That's a particularly beautiful artifact from our collection, and it is this man's buckskin suit. And I'll go into some photos so we can see it a little more closely. The interesting thing about this suit is that it really reflects more than one tribe, more than one culture. So where Sioux City is located, where Siouxland is located, we really have an influence of woodland tribes and plains tribes. And so the suit is a plains style buckskin suit. It would have just fastened here at the front. A man would have worn this. And this type of the beadwork that's across the shoulders and around the neckline, this is kind of a linear style of beadwork that's similar to Plains Indian beadwork. The rest of the beadwork is really much more ornate, in this particular instance done by someone who was probably more skilled than did this beadwork here. And the quality is just incredible, and it really is more of a woodland style. So we might have, for example, a coat that is maybe Lakota, and the beadwork which might have been Santee. So two different tribes, both Sioux tribes, but maybe they came together. So it's interesting to think, what's the story behind these two different pieces? All of the beadwork actually was first sewn onto another garment, cut off of that garment, and then sewn onto this one. And you can kind of see that here on the side. Do you see how raised the beads look? And there's actually kind of a blue background. They were sewn onto some kind of a blue wool piece of clothing and then sewn onto this leather garment. So a wonderful, wonderful piece of sewing, of craftsmanship, of artistry. And it would be fantastic if we knew more details about who made it. It might have been made by a couple of people. It might have been worn by a couple of people. We just don't know, but it's a wonderful, wonderful piece. Let me go back to our virtual pictures here. And so along this curved wall, we see artifacts and stories from the different tribes that have lived here historically. And a lot of, again, wonderful artifacts there. You can see the center of the road paver. The controls are essentially right over here. It was driven, it was not pulled. And then that's the mixer there where the concrete's mixed. So looking forward, let's move to the next slide. And we can see a log cabin here. We can see a teepee here that people can go inside both of these and explore and play. There's an exhibit here about early tradespeople and craftsmen in Sioux City. And then in this corner, we have an exhibit about the Ho-Chunk tribe of Nebraska who live, their reservation is about 30 miles from Sioux City. This on the wall is a cast of a petroglyph located near Macy, Nebraska. It's a petroglyph of a creature known as the water spirit, and it represents one of 12 clans of the Ho-Chunk tribe. From here we can also see this is called the Trolley Theater. It's shaped like a little trolley car that would have been present, part of the landscape in Sioux City. And then inside there are hundreds of great vintage photos that you can view on this screen, and they're all classified by themes. And this is a great way to highlight a really wonderful photographic collection here at the Sioux City Museum. In the next scene, we've moved past the log cabin and we're looking at artifacts from early settlers in Sioux City. On this table here, we have a tin box, which was the first bank of Sioux City. And then we have this chess table, or excuse me, this chess and checkers set here, some early trunks as well. But I want to show you this chess and checkers set because I think that's one of the wonders of Sioux City. And here's a close-up of that piece. This was a hand-carved chess set used by early French fur traders in what became Sioux City. The chess set is the fourth wonder. It was made by Louis Letellier, an early Sioux City settler, and was used by many of Sioux City early founders, including Théophile Bruyère, Joseph Lyonnaise, Dr. John Cook, and Letellier himself. The board and the pieces date to 1860. And I really like to imagine the interesting places they might have played chess, all the different log cabins they might have been sitting in all those long winter days. A lot of great conversations from those early settlers must have played out right in front of this chessboard. So we're fortunate to have such a great piece. In this area, we see artifacts that represent some of the early ethnic groups that came to Sioux City that are still part of the community today. Behind that, we have an early 1900s carriage that was used by the Badgerow family here in Sioux City. Our next slide takes us kind of to the back of the museum, the back corner of the museum. You can see here the bucket of the road paver, and then you'll see a large boom that it would slide back and forth on. You can also see artifacts related to the media, including newspaper printing blocks and an early TV camera and an early typewriter. So I'll pan here. So here you can see the boom and then some of those early artifacts from the media as well. Now we're in a section called Create and Innovate, which is about some of the prominent and interesting businesses that have called Sioux City home over the years. So you're going to see some names and businesses that you recognize and maybe some that are new to you. And I just want to highlight one of those businesses that is probably new to you since it doesn't exist anymore, and that is the Carrie Keene Company. And I'm calling this one of our wonders. When you see the picture, you might think, well, that doesn't seem so wonderful, but it really is an interesting story. So this is our fifth wonder, and it's called the Carrie Keene Trunk. And this was made in 1928 by the Carrie Keene Manufacturing Company, which was located in Leeds. Paul Lear patented his design in 1925 for a trunk that could be attached to early automobiles, which if you can think in your mind what an early automobile looked like, they didn't have trunks. So he was really trying to respond to the high demands of the era for this trunk space. By 1930, Carrie Keene was really in its heyday. They were producing trunks for 76 different car models, as well as 4 versions of an airplane called the Carrie Keene Coupe. They also operated a flying school out of the Leeds airport, and they offered a variety of car accessories. They had a famous advertisement with Abbott and Lou Costello sitting in one of their trunks, which really helped boost sales. But the Depression hit the company pretty hard, and by the 30s, cars came with built-in spacious trunks for most models, and that really killed the demand for the Carrie Keene's main product. And so the company fell apart in 1937, but we'll see a little more from them in the upcoming slides. And here you can see that trunk on display. On the next scene, you might recognize this Wayne the horse, who was kind of a prominent feature on West 7th Street in front of a leather shop for many years. Many generations remember Wayne the horse. We have this fire hose cart, and then a lot of artifacts here related to the telephone company, and even an old telephone booth, which we love to try to get kids to guess what what is that? And eventually they figure out it was a telephone booth. In this area, when you visit in person, you can go inside this little kiosk here, and there's a wonderful timeline, interactive timeline of two companies who really were, who really changed the way their businesses operated globally. And so it's a timeline of Gateway and IBP. And when you learn more about those histories, you'll see how they really were game changers for their industries. We've got a Hawkeye truck here. Those were manufactured in Sioux City as well. This next area is highlighted. It's by our disaster wall, which I'll show you here in a moment. It's all about overcoming adversity. So yes, Sioux City had disasters. We had crises over the years, but really one of the things we found was the amazing ways that Sioux Cityans came together to repair the disasters that happened here. And so this brick wall actually has 4 screens on it in which a movie plays on the 4 screens every 10 minutes. The movies are about 3 minutes long, and they're all about these Sioux City disasters. So there's a film about a 1904 fire downtown, the 1953 Floyd River flood, and the crash of Flight 232. Also in this section, we've got a lot of equipment from fire and police departments, including this beautifully restored 1918 ladder truck that is like those that would have been used in Sioux City. In this area, there's a small piece here that I'm going to talk about next, and it is really about adversity and crisis that took place here in Sioux City, and I think it's a great story. So I'm going to show you a close-up of this piece. Show you that next. So this is a weapon, essentially, a weapon of self-defense. And it was carried by the Reverend George C. Haddock, and he was a pastor here in Sioux City at the First Methodist Church. He came to Sioux City in 1885, and he was a believer, a staunch believer in the temperance movement and the prohibition of alcohol. Iowa had passed prohibition laws on alcohol in the early 1880s, but Sioux City defied that law for many years, continuing to produce, sell, and distribute alcoholic products. At First Methodist, Haddock preached and denounced the prohibition and sale of liquor, and he even helped local and state authorities by gathering evidence against distributors. So on August 3rd, 1886, Haddock he had rented a carriage and a horse and was traveling to Greenville, which was then a small village just outside of Sioux City. And he was there to find evidence against liquor sellers. When he returned to the carriage, to the stable on Water Street, there was essentially a mob there of brewery owners and liquor distributors. And out of that mob, a shot rang out, and he was killed. Now, he did not believe in carrying firearms, and so the only weapon he carried on him at that time to defend himself was this small iron pulley or wheel, which was tied to a rope that was long enough for him to wrap around his wrist. The crowd dispersed quickly after the gunshots, and in later years, a few men were tried, but none were convicted. Haddock's death did spawn a very nasty backlash. The existing state laws were more strictly enforced than they had been in the past, and Sioux City earned itself a poor reputation. Many of the breweries and distilleries left town and moved across the river to Nebraska, away from Iowa's liquor laws. And Iowa repealed the state ban on alcohol in 1892. They passed it again in 1916, and that lasted until the repeal of the federal prohibition in 1933. I'll move back here. You might have guessed what this is. It's the Carrie Keene coupe. So we saw the Carrie Keene trunk. This is the Carrie Keene coupe, and it's actually in the museum as well. So from this angle, we can pan up, and it's hard to see with all the infrastructure there, but there's the Carrie Keene coupe. and this was produced and sold in the 1920s. But as we discussed, the Kerry King Company went out of business around that time. Now, if you're in downtown Sioux City and you are here at night, one thing you might like to do, you might have picked up that this wall, essentially this long wall of the museum here, is a wall of windows. And at night, the screens are up. The screens are down during the day to protect the artifacts from too much light, but the screens are up and you can see our fire truck, our Kerry King. You can actually see the disaster wall as well. It's wonderfully lit, so it's really a great view of at night to see, you know, just our exciting exhibits on display just as you drive by or walk by. Now this is our final view of the permanent gallery of the Sioux City Public Museum, and it's focused on the Sioux City stockyards. So the stockyards are really completely gone now, but in the heyday, which lasted many, many years and many generations, this was one of the largest stockyards in the world. Along with the public stockyards sales area, the mini city, as it was known, was surrounded by large and small related businesses of all kinds. In the exhibit area, you'll see these large cutouts, the life-size cutouts of workers of all kinds. You know, actually the actual packing plant workers, the media workers, you'll see scientists, you'll see restaurant workers. So these reflect the thousands of people that worked at various types of jobs in the yards. Dominating the stockyards were the big three meatpacking plants, Swift, Armour, and Cudahy. The stockyards, meatpacking, and other associated industries went through a great deal of transformation from the 1870s to the early 2000s when the stockyards itself closed. So I'm calling the stockyards our seventh wonder, but I did select a colorful item to showcase just because it's fun. And that is this piece here, who is Frankie the Wiener. So here's Frankie, and Frankie is a wiener costume that we think comes from the era of the 1920s, 1930s. And if you look closely, you can see here armholes. And so there's kind of a band across the top on the inside here, so your arms would stick out and your head wouldn't go way up here where Frankie's head is. Your eyes and mouth would be right here in the bow tie. This is kind of a netting here so you could see out and so you could breathe. And you could see that Frankie is promoting the Swift premium hot dogs. And there's an image here of the Swift company that had such a prominent presence in the stockyards area. This became Katy Station. And do you remember early, right when we started our tour, we could see those architectural remnants, those pieces in the lobby of the museum. That's what we have here from the original Swift plant. We don't have any images really, or even a record of Frankie being used other than he was found in, he was purchased as part of a collection from Katy Station. And obviously he's there representing Swift and the meatpacking industry to some degree, but maybe he was used at something like this. So this is an image of the Interstate Livestock Fair, which was really tied in to the Sioux City stockyards in many ways. And this is from about 1924 here at the Interstate Livestock Fair. I can just imagine someone wearing Frankie the Wiener costume going up and down the midway there at the livestock fair. Well, that's the end of our virtual tour. I want to thank you for coming along with us today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll visit soon in person. We change temporary exhibits every few months, so there's always something new to see on your visit. And we have many opportunities to explore the museum virtually, from our monthly History at High Noon programs on our webpage and also on YouTube, our virtual museum collections online, SiouxCityHistory.org with a lot of great stories and oral histories, and new virtual offerings almost weekly on our webpage and on our Facebook page. So Hope you can find us in one of those places. Thanks again, and hope to see you soon.